Hi guys, Tiffany here with a cosplay tutorial for how I made the hair pieces for my Andrea costume from Aurora Kingdom. And to help you make your own hair pieces, I have a 2D blueprint available on my website, www.tiffanygordoncosplay.com, or see the link below. For these pieces, I decided to go on the route of 3D printing because I really needed these to be structurally sound, as well as I wanted to make all of the pieces look like they were floating. So in order to do that, I took my 2D line work from Adobe Illustrator and imported it into a 3D modeling CAD program called Rhino 6. And once there, I raised all of my 2D lines to the height that I wanted each of the gems to be, and then slowly drew in 3-dimensional space the base part to the now higher surface, and from this part, I ended up doing a 2-rail sweep. That way it would make a solid piece. Now that I have the one half done, I ended up puzzle piecing each of the pieces together so they would be connected, and then I mirrored it to the opposite side. This way I only had to draw one side and it would look the same on the opposite. And then repeated the same process for each of the gems. For the circle part of the hair pieces, I ended up making each of the pieces into individual shapes, connecting them so they were one solid line, and then extruding them to the height that I wanted them. And for the circle gem part, I did a circle and then cut it in half so that way it would be a half dome. I also wanted to make the circle gem where it was separate, and so to do this I needed to offset where the circle would sit, so that way the printer would be two separate pieces and would sit nice and snug and still have room for glue. And once all of the central pieces were done, I then merged all of the pieces together so they would make one piece. And back to the gems now. Each of the gems I wanted to make where they didn't lay flat into the central piece. I wanted to make them have a slight angle. So first I created the same thickness of the clear acrylic rod that was slightly bigger, and rotated each of the gems with the rod still connected in it slightly downward. Once all of the gems were at the right angle that I wanted, I then did a Boolean difference where it ended up cutting out the section where the rod would sit inside the gem, as well as where the rod would sit inside the central piece, leaving an empty cavity. This piece will end up being replaced by a clear acrylic rod later. And now that all of my CAD was done, I mirrored it so that way I had two of the same pieces, and then ended up printing them on my Prusa i3 Mark 2.5 3D printer. When the prints were all done and taken off of the printer bed, I then removed all of the structural support. And like any 3D printed object, there is going to be stair steps. And for this, I like to clean it up as much as possible. And how I start to do this is I use flexible spackling with a little bit of water to rub it into all of the stair step. This will make it so you're adding more material. And then once it is dry, you sand it away so that way it's flush. At the same time, I also ended up getting clear acrylic rod, which I measured to my desired length for each of the gems and then cut at my workbench with a jeweler's saw. And to attach the clear acrylic rod to the gems, I first roughed up the part that would be inserted into the gem with sandpaper, and then used 2-part epoxy to glue each of the pieces in place. Once all of the pieces were dry, I then took every piece of the hair pieces to my garage and sprayed a heavy coat of sandable spray paint onto all of the surfaces. This is another material used to fill stair steps and to further make the surface of our 3D prints smooth and flat. And once all of the paint was dry, I then sanded every piece again and then repeated everything one more time. Now for my favorite part, painting! And as always, for our airbrush painting, we use Createx Colors Wicked Color line. And for starting off, we're going to be painting all of the gems, and we did this by doing a base white coat onto each of the gem pieces. And next I proceeded to paint, starting off with a pink color, which I used a red, a white, and a pearl white color to make, and then adding a little bit of a purple mix to it afterwards for a more gem shadowy like effect. And for the last coat on the pink, went back with some more white pearlescent color so it would really have that gem effect. Next was for the blue gems, and each of these I did a base coat of a blue, followed by adding more white, or in some cases a darker blue to the mixes to add more highlights and shadows to the gems. And here's what all of the gems look like so far for the hair pieces. For the central pieces, I started off with a base coat of black airbrush paint, and then sprayed a coat of the gold chrome onto the pieces. And now that all of the pieces are painted and dry, it's time to seal them. And on all of the gold pieces, I used Cretex Colors UVLS Clear using their satin. And then on all of the gem pieces, I used their gloss to give a more gem shine look. Now to assemble all of the pieces together. I first started off by attaching the circle gem piece to the circular pieces using 2-part epoxy, and then started to attach the gems to the central piece, starting with the top one, gluing it with 2-part epoxy, and then holding it in place until it was dry, and then proceeded to do this for each of the other gems, doing one at a time. And here's what all of the pieces look like once they are attached together. The last part is the attachments for putting them onto your head. And for this, I ended up using hair clips where I epoxied them in place, having it where it would stick outward, so that way once it was dry, you could clip it into the wefts of your wig and the hairpiece would hold in place. And that is how I created the hair pieces for my Andrea costume from Aura Kingdom. I hope you enjoyed this cosplay tutorial and it helps you for your next cosplay builds. And remember to subscribe to the channel and like the video, and I will see you for our next cosplay tutorial. Much love, guys. Mwah!